Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Oliver is trapped and rescued. Oliver spends most of his time inside, either picking the stitches names of Fagin's handkerchiefs or practicing Fagin's game. Before long, he began to beg the old gentleman to allow him to go out and work. Too. One morning, Fagin sent Oliver into the street with Charles Bartius, the Dodger, who were to teach him his new job. The two boys, doing their best to stay out of sight, sneaked up close behind a fine old gentleman. He was a wealthy-looking person with white hair and gold spectacles. He has picked up a book at one of the shop and stood there reading. Soon Oliver was shocked to see the Dodger plunge his hand into the fine old man's pocket, pulling out a handkerchief, and handed it to Charles Bartius. Then they both went running round the corner at full speed. In an instant, the whole mystery of handkerchiefs, the jewels, and Fagin filled Oliver's mind. He stood for a moment with the blood in all his veins, tingling from terror. Confused and frightened, he ran. As Oliver began to run, the old gentleman put his hand in his pocket and found his handkerchief missing. Turning quickly and seeing Oliver scurrying away so fast, he shouted, "Stop, thief!" and ran off after him, book in hand. The Dodger and Charlie saw Oliver run by them, and they too ran off, shouting, "Stop thief! Stop thief!" Away they ran, all ran, tearing, yelling, screaming, knocking people down as they turned the corners. Even all the dogs started barking. Terrified, Oliver ran to keep ahead of everybody chasing him. Then, pow! A sharp and clever punch knocked him from his feet, and looked up to see a man with a pale, twisted face staring very hard at him. The man turned and left as a crowd began to form. The fine old gentleman whose handkerchief had been stolen was among them. A police officer made his way through the crowd and grabbed Oliver by the collar. "It wasn't me, sir. It was the two other boys," Oliver cried, clasping his hand and looking around. "Don't hurt him," said the old gentleman in a kind and tender voice. Oliver was placed into a stone jail cell and searched. Nothing was found. The gentleman, named Mr. Brownlow, began to think Oliver was telling the truth. "There is something in that boy's face," he thought, "something familiar that touched me. Can he be innocent?" Mr. Brownlow tried to remember all the faces from his past. Something made him feel he had seen Oliver before. He could not think when or where it might have been. Soon the old man and Oliver stood before a judge by the name of Fang, known for his cruelty. The police officer started that he had captured the suspect, searched him, and found nothing on him. The judge would not listen to Mr. Brownlow as he tried to explain things. Judge Fang turned to Oliver. "What's your name?" Oliver tried to reply, but he couldn't talk. He felt like he was going to faint. The whole room seemed to be turning round and round. He could not answer the question, knowing that no reply would make Mr. Fang even angrier. The police officer tried to help. He says his name is Tom What, Your Honor," said Oliver. At this point, Oliver raised his head, looked around, and asked for water. "Stuff and nonsense," said Mr. Fang. "Don't try to make a fool of me. I think he really is ill, Your Honor," said the officer. Oliver fainted and fell to the floor. "Let him lie there," said Fang. "He'll soon be tired of that." "How do you plan to deal with the case, sir?" asked the clerk as he bent over the boy. "He is sentenced to 3 months at hard labor, of course. Clear the office," ordered Mr. Fang. A couple couple of men were getting ready to carry the boy to his jail cell when an older man quickly rushed towards the judge bench. "Clear the office," cried Mr. Fang. "I will speak," cried the man. "I will not be turned away. I saw the pickpocket. I saw it all." The man began. I am the owner of the bookstore. Another boy did the robbery. I saw the whole thing, and I saw that this boy was shocked and surprised at what he saw. Then the boy is free to go. "Clear the office," roared Mr. Brownlow. Poor boy," said Mr. Brownlow, bending over him. "I'll take him with me." The driver of the coach which Mr. Brownlow had hired stopped before a neat house on the quiet, shady street. Oliver found himself in a soft, clean bed. He had never before been given such kindness and care, but Oliver was very ill indeed, and fever raged through him for days and days. Weak and pale, he finally woke one morning as if from a bad dream. He raised himself up in the bed and looked around. "Where am I? This is not the room I went to sleep in," he said. "Hush, my dear," said an old lady softly. "You have been sick, very sick. Lie down again. That's it, little dear." With those words, the old lady placed Oliver's head upon the pillow. She looked so kindly and loving into his face that he could not help placing his little hand in hers and pulling it round his neck. "Mercy," said the old lady with tears in her eyes. "What a thankful little child it is. Pretty thing. What would his mother feel if she could see him now?" "Perhaps she does see me," whispered Oliver, folding his hands together. "Perhaps she had sat by me. I almost feel as if she is. But heaven is a long way off, and they are too happy up there to come down to the bedside of a poor boy." When he opened his eyes the next day, Oliver felt cheerful and happy. He was still weak to walk, so the kind lady, Mr. Bedouin, the housekeeper, had him carried downstairs to her room. Oliver enjoyed sitting in Mrs. Bedouin's room. He particularly liked to look at the painting on the wall. It was a portrait of someone's face, a pretty young woman. "It is so pretty," he said, "but the eyes look so sad. Wherever I sit, they seem to follow me. It's as if she were alive and wanted to speak to me, but she couldn't." And just then Mr. Brownlow entered the room. Poor boy," he said, clearing his throat. "How do you feel, Tom White?" "Very happy, sir, and very thankful for your goodness to me. But my name is Oliver, sir, Oliver Twist." "Strange name," said the old gentleman. "What made you tell the judge your name was White?" "I never told him so, sir," returned Oliver, surprised at Mr. Brownlow's question. This sounded so much like a fib that the old gentleman looked hard at Oliver's face. It was impossible to think he was lying. There was too much truth in his little eyes. "Perhaps there was some mistake," said Mr. Brownlow, as he continued to stare at Oliver. He thought again how much Oliver's face reminded him of another face he had seen. He could not get it out of his mind. He studied the picture over Oliver's face and then stared again at the boy's face. The two faces looked almost alike. Mr. Brownlow let out such a sharp cry of wonder that Oliver fainted away out of tears. of fears.